Crimson. Or would you prefer if I called you Ken?
You? You're the gunman from Rosewood.
Yep. Came a long way. Killed plenty of infected to come and find you.
Find me? So, those papers I found in your hideout. It's true you're hunting people in the QZ?
Yep. My partner didn't think you were stupid enough to come to the city. I thought differently.
Partner?
That's right. You never formally met him, did you? He's the one that took that pot shot at you back at the residential district. You're lucky I messed up his scope after I dropped his rifle. Otherwise, you'd have joined the pileup back. But, here we are. I gotta admit, you've done pretty well for a civilian. Tourist even. Really drove most of the infected away from that tunnel so I could catch up to you. Shame I gotta put you down.
Look, I came to this city to turn myself over to the military. You could just hand me to the nearest checkpoint and then...
It's too late for that. You threw your life away the moment you jumped from that chopper into the QZ. Now, it's my job to make sure you don't get out alive. Not like I have a problem with that. It'd be more of a mercy killing anyways, consider... You can't outdraw an American, Brit. Come on, Ken. Why not make this easy on us both? Really though, I'll make sure you won't feel it. You might be able to kill a group of infected like a pro, but you can't fight healthy folk for shit. Well, this was fun. Hell, I'd even say it's been a pleasure. But honestly, chasing you down has been a real pain in the ass. Yeah! Hello? Michelson Private Air? Hi. Yeah, I'd like to hire a helicopter for an aerial tour. Mm-hmm. A heading? Well, I know this might sound crazy, but if I were to pay you 3 times the usual amount, could you find me a pilot who'd be willing to take me a little further north?
What? Where am I? I was... on the road and... What? Dear reader, I saw your fight with one of the KCDC guys, or at least the end of it, when you fell. I was going to leave you behind until, when searching through your stuff, I found a bag filled with medicine and my initials on the tag. In that case, I guess that you must be working for the good doctor. As much as I'd like to stay and wait for you to wake up so I could thank you personally, I have people waiting for me back home. If you have a radio, set the frequency to these numbers and wait for me to contact you in a few days. I'll be more than happy to repay you for what you've done for me. Talk to you soon. As I threw on the damaged hoodie and put my bag over my shoulder, I couldn't wrap my head around how lucky I was. How lucky that after falling in the street, the very person to save me from becoming an infected horde's dinner was the exact same that I had to deliver these doctor's medical supplies to. As I washed my face and clothing, I then realised that what if I had just used the last of my luck? Because as I was carefully wandering through this home, I remembered that the same doctor who had forced this task on me had injected me with something, which now would have taken full effect. Unfortunately, my gun and knife were missing, and with an underwhelming lacklustre of weapons in this home, I'd have to make do with what I had on me. After destroying a vintage wine and taking a glass shard, I wrapped what was left of it in some tape. It would have to do. Right before I had summed up what courage, or Look, I had left. The not-so-distant sound of a helicopter passing by caught my ear, as well as the ears of many infected nearby. Hopefully it would lure them away enough for me to try and get back to my vehicle. At least it gave me more time to plan my next route. Looking at the map that the doctor gave me, there was one final location marked with a large white circle. It was at the end of a street, and, of course, to get to it, I'd have to pass through where a large number of infected would be clustering. I guess that's where the doctor was expecting me to meet him last night. Perhaps if he was still there, he could do something about whatever injection he'd put into me. Eventually leaving the apartment, I'd hoped that the distant sound of the helicopter had lured most of the infected away. I was wrong. While the fog did help, it had a very little effect on the vision of the nearby infected. Still, I made sure to take my time when traversing the alleyways. Heading towards some storage units, I'd hoped that perhaps maybe one of them had belonged to a prepper, and that I might end up finding myself something more durable than a glass shiv. Nothing here. Nothing here either. The next two units were locked, but in the fifth one, well, it wasn't a prepper's storage unit, but a sports enthusiast still had its uses. Now all I'd need is a hammer, some nails, and I'd feel a hell of a lot safer than with my makeshift letter opener. Moving past the units, I suddenly found myself recognizing the passing wrecks of nearby cars. It was then I knew that I was close to the truck that I had left behind. Of course it was stolen. You leave a working truck with its key still in the ignition, of course someone's going to nick it off you. Now I was in a panic. The longer it took for me to arrive at the doctor, the more danger I'd be putting on my life with this mysterious infection. So, bursting into short sprints across the city, I put my slow and stealthy plans out the window, and instead decided that the fastest way to the doctor's was a direct one, crossing the streets and hopping the fences. Walking straight into the open road, risking where any nearby hordes of infected could follow me till I eventually collapsed of exhaustion. Checking a nearby police car, I did find a Mini 14 police rifle. It was missing a mag, and I didn't have any ammo that would work with it anyways, but feeling desperate, I grabbed the expensive paperweight. Further along the road, now I was starting to enter the residential neighbourhood of Raven Creek, and I was a few blocks closer to my destination on the map. Despite my reservations for traversing what would be popular infected areas, I was surprised to see a very little number of infected near. Until a house's alarm went off. Great, now any infected ahead or behind me would be lumbering towards that siren. Hopefully this small nearby cluster of trees would cover me enough that they'd spare me a bloodshot glance from infected. Finding a house nearby, I made sure to enter as quietly as I could, so as to not trip yet another alarm. Checking inside, there wasn't much in the nightstand, but in the closet I found myself some decent head protection. And it was in my colour too. Putting it on, I knew I wouldn't have to worry about hitting my head anymore. Down the street, I quickly ran past what infected I could see around me, and yet another uncomfortably close alarm was echoing through the neighbourhood, attracting more infected from the city towards me. By now, though, I was already at the place where the doctor wanted me to meet him. Dealing with what few infected were around, I then thought that it was best for me to take off my helmet, so if the doctor was here, he wouldn't mistake me for someone that wasn't his delivery service. Hello? Doctor? It's that guy you met at the hospital? Oh, maybe he's already left. Ah! Fuck. Seriously, twice in one day? Should have kept the friggin' helmet on. You kidding? Another note? What, ran out of tape recorders? Dear Postman. Seriously. I'm writing this because you apparently didn't take my last recording device with you, dick. Oh, real mature. I was about to leave this location since you didn't arrive last night, so you can imagine my surprise when I see you walking up the road. After knocking you out, I checked your things to see if you had followed my instructions. Upon getting confirmation from 2 of the 3 people that you were supposed to take these supplies to, I'm going to guess that you weren't stupid enough to leave or keep that last bag for yourself. So, I'm going to let you off with a warning. If you ever break into my hospital again, you're going to need more than any of the medication that building has to offer when I'm through with you. You'll find your stuff in the next room over. As for that mystery infection I gave you, that was a lie. Thank you for your generosity helping me with my deliveries, Doc. So this whole time he just played me, just to make me do his deliveries for him? Well, this whole trip was a giant waste of time. From the moment I grabbed what I needed from the hospital, I should have just left. Well, no point feeling sore about it now. At least I could lay my head down knowing that I'm not slowly dying of an infection. In the next room, before I gathered my things, I needed to decide what I could carry back with me, as I was already almost at my weight limit. I begrudgingly left behind the Mini-14. It was a stupid idea to carry that heavy weapon with me anyways. I had no means of effectively using it. I mean, I barely found myself any pistol ammo, so what were the chances that I'd find some suitable rifle ammo? Inspecting the garage, I also found some nails and a hammer too. I spent the duration of my early morning hours upgrading my bat. And before leaving, I noticed that my red hoodie was badly damaged. And with the cold coming in, it made sense to try and find a suitable substitute. Luckily, in a box nearby, I found another one. It wasn't red, unfortunately, so I'd have to settle with edgy grey until I found something a little more my style. With warmer clothes and improved weaponry, I set out on a journey back to my base. Rather than make a beeline straight to my home, instead I decided to take a more scenic hike around the outskirts of Raven Creek. That way I could scout the area for supplies as well as get a lay of the land while avoiding as many infected as I could. Heading out, it was clear that those alarms yesterday had stirred something up in the infected, as there was almost triple the amount I had to avoid in order just to leave the neighbourhood. Yet again, there was another passing chopper. Rather than risk catching a bullet seeing if it was friendly or not, I hid inside a nearby home until I heard its blades grow a faint distance. While I could have just waited for it to pass completely, there was no telling whether it would circle back, and leaving the home, yet another distraction would appear ahead of me, provoking a larger group of infected to act. Quickly blocking myself in a gated car park, I know how to deal with my entrapped attackers. After which, I entered the wooden premises, and my heart soon sank, because it turns out I had to pass through a cemetery in order to make it safely through this block. A dark thought soon emerged as I began to think, what if the once resting dead were now suddenly awake, and were writhing inside their caskets, never to be put to rest again? I soon had my answer, as atop one of the nearby tombs where I had placed my hand, I could feel the somewhat faint vibrations of something moving. They must have been placed in there at the beginning of the Nox infection, before the people were told to burn their dead. Leaving the cemetery, I was now entering what looked like a small industrial area. Looking around, it was clear that most of the infected were still carrying some equipment on them, and the buildings had looked barely touched. That meant that there could still be some materials I could use in the near future. Past there, I soon found myself wandering into yet another private estate near the edge of the creek. If I stuck to the coast, I'd be dodging all kinds of infected that were waiting to the east. As I began walking across the coast, I couldn't help but feel a tinge of homesickness awaking from inside me. The feeling of the sand beneath my shoes, the sound of the water as it lapped at my laces, and the squawking of birds overhead. I took a moment to stand still and close my eyes, and for but a moment I was back in the UK, back home, back where I was safe. I should get a move on. As expected, my walk across the beach was inevitably interrupted. After dealing with them, it didn't take long for me to find yet another sad location as I passed through what looked like a primary school. I could barely remember my time as a bairn back then. Moving on, I saw that it was getting late, and not wanting to walk around the city in complete darkness, I instead climbed the stairs of a nearby apartment to rest for the night. I spent some time on the roof, not looking at the infected that shambled below the streets, but at the sunset, and the colours that it left on the clouds as it passed by. I'd seen enough infected for 2 days. I had earned some time to stand, pretending to be in ignorant bliss of everything that was around me. After sunset, before laying down, I had found yet another paper, which depicted the events of the beginning of the Nox outbreak. Reading it, I was specifically looking for anything that involved the KCDC. The closest article read along the lines of, branches of researchers and other scientists have begun to run tests on infected individuals. They are claiming that it's mandatory, and that no one who is showing signs of infected will be harmed. There was a picture in the paper which showed these researchers. They wore bright-coloured jumpsuits and gas masks, one of which was holding a rifle. Seems in the early hours of day 33, that familiar unsettling purple mist had shown up again. The reason I hid up here was so I wouldn't have to walk in the dark streets at night. But now I had to do it during the day. Seems I had used up what was left of my luck yesterday. Oh, shit. Shit. Making sure to be as stealthy as possible. Right. I'm gonna need to try and keep as low as I can if I want to avoid getting jumped in the purple fog. Hopping a fence to the highway, I slowly made my way north, trying to avoid catching any attention from infected nearby. I thought my luck was starting to return when I found an abandoned military Humvee, but to my surprise it had been completely looted. Carrying on, I checked a nearby police cruiser where I found a spare magazine for a pistol. Before moving forward, I had to momentarily double back to avoid some infected that were ahead of me. As much as I wanted to check another police cruiser, I was unable to get inside, and the last thing I wanted to do was break some glass and catch more infected attention. Entering a nearby car park, I found a single truck facing the entrance, as if it was driven here. Checking inside. Yes! Someone had left the keys inside, but it needed more fuel. Rather than risk driving it into the thick fog, instead I marked a location on my map so I could come back to it later on. This is where the impossible happened. As I was leaving, I found another red hoodie, just laying there on the ground, in a location that I had never explored. I don't care how much of my fleeting luck was left, but I know that I didn't waste any of it when I found this. Much better. Moving on, I climbed a nearby fence in order to get back to the main road. Looking through what vehicles I found along the way, I eventually found the Raven Creek Cortex. My curiosity, as well as hunger, got the better of me, so, heading inside, I stole what food was left from a vending machine in the lobby, and then found a pipe I could swap out for my damaged bat in the supply room. With my curiosity and hunger satiated, I left the courthouse and continued on my hike home. The not-so-distant sound of infected gnashing their teeth and clawing at the doors of apartments nearby had made my skin crawl, so I slowly crept deeper into the fog. Checking the interior of certain vehicles, like news vans and others, I was able to find a magazine on how to make my own radio, as well as a magazine on air pressure weaponry. Nice. Eventually I was able to pinpoint certain vehicles and buildings that I'd recognized on my way through the streets before. I was slowly getting closer to home. Not a couple streets later, I was back at my base. Just to be safe though, I made sure to use the fence round back so as to not lead any infected inside. Crossing the courtyard, I entered the building that was housing my temporary home, and it seems that I had visitors shamble their way inside. At the very moment that I got to my apartment floor, distant tornado warning signs echoed through the Knox County, signalling the dispersion of the purple mist. What luck. I immediately went to storing everything that I had gathered after the last couple of days wandering the city streets. Washing my face in the mirror, even though there was still infected wandering my building, I knew that while that door was shut, I was safe. Heading back to my living room, I took a well-earned rest sitting on the couch and began to reflect on everything that had happened to me these last few days. The places I'd been, the people I'd helped, even though I didn't want to. The people I think I'm going to stay inside for a few days.